John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast. Today we're reading Hellblazer number 90, and just a little catch up on what's been going on. John is currently in Australia, and he has gotten mixed up in a dispute between a uranium ore mining company and a group of aborigines. The mining company has gotten approval from the government to take over the current aboriginal area to mine, and of course the aborigines don't want to leave as this has been their land for eons. So now John is helping out the aborigines and has gone into the Dreamtime, which is a supernatural aboriginal realm, to speak to the Rainbow Serpent, who in aborigine lore is the creator of all things. And just before John went into the Dreamtime, the ore company representatives, led by a woman named Miss Grenshaw, drove onto aboriginal land and told them that they have 2 weeks to vacate or they will remove the aborigines by force. So that's where we left off, with this ultimatum being given to the aborigines, and John in his trance, his body playing a didgeridoo while the aborigines do a ceremonial dance around him, and his mind in the Dreamtime about to speak to the Rainbow Serpent. So first things first, with issue 90, we got the cover. A naked John Constantine is being held in the air by a snake's body that is wrapping around him in coils, and he is kind of being held in a Jesus Christ pose. And we see that this issue was written by Paul Jenkins with art by Sean Phillips. And we start off on the first page, right where we left off, with John being confronted by the Rainbow Serpent in the Dreamtime, and then in reality. And in reality, his body is playing the didgeridoo as part of this aboriginal ceremony. So as John looks up at the Rainbow Serpent, his narration says, "I can feel her thoughts in the deep ebony blackness. She's wondering how a white man came to be in her river, especially this particular white man. The Rainbow Serpent's eyes are mirrors into our collective soul. All white man's flaws are reflected in the glass. Sing to me," she says. "Tell me why you disturbed the great dream with the sound of your drowning." The serpent's anger has ruptured the Dreamtime void, sending ripples of hatred into the visible world. She demands that I sing, asking for her forgiveness. But a nagging little voice, the devil who sits on my shoulder, has different ideas. So we see in the Dreamtime, as the snake is becoming angry that John is not singing, in reality, John is able to stop playing the didgeridoo, which causes the aborigines to stop dancing, which stops the furthering of the ceremony and kind of pauses the power of the Rainbow Serpent. So John's narration continues talking about the little devil on his shoulder, saying, "He's telling me I'm not really here. I'm sitting on a rock in the middle of Australia, and he has a much better plan. Back in the circle, I've stopped blowing on the didgeridoo. The heartbeat of the creative ancestors skips a beat. The dancing has ended. The aborigines can sense something's up, but the little voice tells me to ignore them. He's the part of me that likes to gamble with the gods. Lately, he's been thinking hard, and he's worked out what I'm going to say to the snake. He better be right this time, otherwise I'll throttle the little bastard." So instead of singing, John walks up to the snake and looks it directly in the eyes, and he says, "You want me to sing for you? Forget it. I don't do requests." And of course, the Rainbow Serpent looks back at John with contempt and says, "What you say, white man?" But John isn't really intimidated by this, and he continues saying, "You heard me. This old test you puny mortal bollocks went out with the bum flaps and mohawks. I got you pegged, sunshine. There's a great big hole in the Dreamtime, and it's so fucking obvious, I could fit me Uncle Nobby's beer gut in it." And we also see on this page the name of the issue, which is Dangerous Ground. So of course the Rainbow Serpent does not like what John just said. And I think this part's kind of cool because we're seeing John in a couple panels in reality and then a couple panels in the Dreamtime. So we can see in reality he's sitting and he's still not playing the didgeridoo, but a smile is creeping onto his face. And over these panels the narration says, "The serpent's anger has exposed her for what she truly is. I can feel her emotions boiling over into the circle. There's fear in there, and uncertainty. She knows I've got her, dead to rights." Then we see in the Dreamtime, John is actually being wrapped up by the Rainbow Serpent as she lashes out at him, and she says, You dare come into Jukerjana without song? You play dangerous game, white man. And as the snake coils pick John up and begin to wrap around him tightly, John says back, yeah, well, that's the trouble with you minor deities. You think you have some kind of lock on the mysteries of the universe. It's like you've all read the same bloody manual on how to act like a prat. Ugh, what's the matter? Want to shut me up? Be my guest. No sodden worries for me, Tosh. I'm white man. I don't belong in your bloody world. And you can't touch mine. And as John is struggling in the Dreamtime as like the snake is wrapping around his neck and making it hard for him to speak, in reality, we get a panel of John with a big shit-eating grin on his face. So he continues talking to the snake in the Dreamtime saying, I see the truth, all right. Symbols are the power of the Dreamtime, eh? Bollocks! Your secret's out, mate. Do I have to spell it out for you? I'm sitting on a rock surrounded by aborigines, and you can't touch me because your magic doesn't extend to white man. And also, while all this is going on, the aborigines are getting more and more worried because John is supposed to continue playing the didgeridoo during this whole ceremony. So him stopping for such a long period of time is concerning to them. And John continues talking to the snake saying, I can feel them watching me, wondering if their mighty serpent god is listening to my song. They've stopped dancing because they know something's wrong. And I can feel your grip slipping. But that's the whole crack in it. Without the dance, I'm not here. Without the aborigines, neither are you. They're the real power of the Dreamtime. And as John is saying these last words, the snake begins to uncoil around him, almost like it's losing its power. So John lands on the ground and he continues saying, of course, they're going to be pissed off when they find out they've been had. Now, I can make them start dancing again if you'd like. All I have to do is blow. And to this, the snake hisses angrily because it knows it's been beaten by John, and it looks him in the eyes for a second and then says, you clever fella, Whitey. Make them dance. Maybe I listen. So in reality, John begins to play the didgeridoo again, and the aborigines take this as a good sign, so they begin to dance again. And John continues talking to the snake, saying, you really had me fooled, you know that? You never had any intention of pulling the land into Dreamtime. You don't even know how. So you fed the poor bloody believers a pile of shit, got them frightened of the apocalypse. Trouble is, I'm a cynical bastard, and I can see right through it. I've got news for you, sunshine. Want to know why you're stuck in a crappy hole in the middle of nowhere while all the rich and powerful gods are farting about all over the cosmos? Because you're just a small-time aspect of Mother Nature. That's why. You're a bloody child. And the serpent gets offended by this, so it rears up and it says, you wrong, John Constantine. I, the Rainbow Mother, created all creation here. I send powerful messages to white man on his farm. And then John points to the symbols that are on the cave walls and says, you mean these messages? Your fiery freaking signs in the sky? Do me a carrot. See, your average white man don't give a flying fuck. He has powerful juju symbols all of his own. Then very condescendingly he says, of all the gods in all the world, I have to find the one that can't fucking spell. And then John turns his back on the snake because he's trying to goad it in to play his game. So very casually, John says, course, I could help you out. For a price. I'd even throw in the old woman as a bonus. And the snake is intrigued and it says, what you want, white man? And John looks up at it and says, what have you got? And the snake replies, I got Jukerjana, Constantine. Dreamtime echo of every question in your world. You ask, I tell you answer. Then John has a picture in his head of all the questions he wants answers to in the world. And we see this kind of collage of images. So we can see the pyramids. We can see those heads on Easter Island. Even President Kennedy's face. So there's stuff that's like ancient world questions and like crop circles and stuff. And then there's like new conspiracy theory things that are happening with white man's world. And over these pictures, John's narration says, 1,000 images come tumbling out through the open doors. I can see the totality of human history floating in the river. 1,000,000 years ago, the missing link sits in a tree. Downstream, shots ring out as a coup d'etat takes place. And if I want to, I can reach out and truly know. So John thinks for a minute and then says, Seems I've read something about taking apples from strange serpents. I'm not biting. And the snake says, What then, white man, if not answers? And then John gets kind of a devilish look and says, Let's just say you owe me one. Then we turn the page and we cut to the past. And this is the past of the woman who works for the ore mining company, Miss Grinshaw. And we see her as a child playing outside of her house. And from inside the house, we can hear her mom and dad yelling. And the dad is saying, they took it, Maeve. It's mine and they took it. And the mom is answering, Oh, Bill, come on out, darling, please. And the young Miss Grinshaw goes inside the house to one of the doors where the mom is leaning against it and she's talking to her husband through it. And the young girl watches her mom say, Bill, come on, love. You know you haven't been well. And the dad yells through the door, 3 years, Maeve. Watching me mates get ripped to shreds by the bloody Japs, wondering if I'd ever see you with a baby again. And the mom is pleading with him, saying, Bill, you can't do this to me. It'll work out. I know it will. But Bill just continues yelling, saying, And for what? So they could give my land to the bastard Abos? Then the door next to her head shatters, and we hear the sound of a gunfire. And the mom yells out, Bill, no! And we can see also bits of red coming through the door. Then the young Miss Grinshaw says, Mommy. The mom turns horrified, covered in blood, and says, Oh my God. Oh, Kate. Then we cut to present day, where we hear another gunshot, and we see the old Miss Grinshaw is standing there thinking about this that happened to her as a child. And one of her men walks up and says, Kate, Miss Grinshaw, are you okay? And Miss Grinshaw answers, I'm fine, Trev. Just fine. Then we see what those gunshots were, and the rest of her men are shooting at kangaroos. And Trev says to her, We was wondering about the Abos up at the river. Don't make any difference to our bonus, does it? And Miss Grinshaw answers, Don't worry about a thing, Trev. Treon'll pay, as long as they're out of the way by June. And Trev says, Yeah, but you know how it is. All this resettlement stuff takes bloody ages. Ever since the big dry, half of us are living on room meat. We can't afford to wait till June. I mean, what if they won't go? And at this, Miss Grinshaw pulls out her pistol and takes aim at a kangaroo's head and fires her gun, and the head explodes. And she says, Don't worry, Trev. We'll think of something. Then we cut back to John, who is now back in reality after talking to the serpent, and he's having a smoke, looking at a fire, and Jeffo walks up and says, Serpent, she seemed pretty pissed off, mate. You must have sing powerful song in there. And John kind of looks over at him and smiles and says, Well, me whole family's musical, Jeffo. Even the sewing machine's a singer. Then John begins to rummage through his little sack of stuff he brought, and as he does, he says, Fuck that didgeridoo-lark, though. I think I left a friggin' lung in there somewhere. Here, can you send a letter from out here? And Jeffo answers, They're a box out by the Crowfield garage. What you up to then, Jono? And then we see John take out a notepad and a pencil, and he says, Nothing much, mate. Just a little white man's magic. Then John begins to write a letter. Then we cut back to the men who were killing kangaroos with Miss Grinshaw, and there's a bunch of barrels of what I'm assuming are chemicals or poison just sitting on the banks of the river. And one of the men asked Trev, You sure about this? We could get in some serious shit for leaving this stuff out here. And Trevor says, Keep your hair on, Jiff. Nobody'll ever know if you keep your mouth shut. Besides, we ain't leaving it here. And Jiffy replies, Where are you going to put it then? And then Trev walks over to one of the barrels and kicks it in the water and says, What are you, soft or something? I'm sending it to the bloody Abos, downstream. Then we cut to like a week later, and John has just been hanging out there with Jeffo and the rest of the Aborigines, and it seems like Jeffo doesn't quite understand John's plan, so he says to John, Why do we just wait around day after day? Do nothing, Jono. Them white fellows be back here soon. And John says, Have faith, my son. Even your postal system can't be any worse than our poxy lot. And Jeffo replies, Maybe, but what good it do? What'd it say, this letter? And John replies, On the surface, mate, it don't say bugger all. It's what's hidden underneath that counts. See, white man symbols can be just as powerful as yours, if you know how to use them. They can be subtle and seductive. They can even make you buy useless crud you never really wanted in the first place. Me? I've just added a little bit extra into the subtext. A word stressed here, a few threats conspicuous by their absence. Mix it all together, and voila! The right kind of magic for the right kind of arsehole. And as John is saying this, we're seeing the journey of the letter all the way to someone named Edward Rosenberg, who works for Aboriginal Affairs. So John has done something where he sent a letter to someone in the Australian government, and I'm not sure if he used magic or if he just had blackmail or something on this person. But it seems like he's thinking he's going to use the government to stop these white men instead of having it resort to violence. Then we cut to Miss Grinshaw and Trevor, and all the other men are drinking around them, and Trevor even says, "Christ, Kate, this is bloody scary. Half of these drongos are so plastered they can't hardly stand." And Miss Grinshaw says, "Nonsense, Trev. No harm in working up a little Dutch courage. They'll work it off at the river." Then she turns to the men and she picks up a bottle of liquor and says, "Some of you have been wondering when you're going to get paid. You've waited unnecessarily for an extra 2 weeks, all thanks to the stinking bloody abos down at the river. Let me assure you, I've waited a lot longer. Still, good things come to those who wait. We've been authorized to use every method at our disposal to reclaim the land. I assume you know what that means." Then we cut back to John explaining to Jeffo just what he did with the letter, and John is saying, "It's easy really, Jeffo. It's just like the Dreamtime. What you see with your eyes is only half the story. The real power is hidden underneath, just out of sight. But white man, he's avoided it for so long. He's forgotten. He can't see the magic. He can only feel the effects. The glamour circumvents his normal reactions. He knows he's being deceived, but he doesn't know how to fight it. There's only one thing he can do." So it seems John did use magic in this letter, and it's some sort of glamour spell that I guess it makes the reader see whatever John needs him to see, because we get a panel of the representative, and he's looking at the letter very worried. Then we cut back to Ms. Grinshaw for one panel, after she took a big swig of alcohol, and she finishes talking to her men, saying, "Just remember one thing. That clever little palmy bastard is mine." And remember, that's what she calls John, so she's got it out for John. Then we cut back to the desk of the representative after he's read the letter, and we see that the initial request that was sent by Tryon and Ms. Grinshaw has a big rejected stamp on it now. So it seems John's plan did work, and whatever the representative saw made him reject the proposal that was approved before that was sent by Ms. Grinshaw. Then we cut back to John and the Aborigines, and we see John and Jeffo kind of standing as the other Aborigines are picking up very large rocks from the river and throwing them all on the path around them. And Jeffo says, "Jono, this is crazy. What bloody good this do?" And John replies, "Your problem, mate, is not being a devious fucker. Me, I'm rotten to the core." And just as he says that, all of a sudden they see a car coming down the road, and it is Miss Grinshaw's vehicle. And Jeffo points at it and says, "See, I tell you they come back." And John replies, "I was counting on it, Jeffo." Then we cut to the car full of people, and everybody's freaking out because it's very, very bumpy as they're driving over all these big rocks that the Aborigines have thrown in their way. And Trevor's yelling, "Watch it, Jiffy, you bloody twit! Mind out for the rocks!" And Jiffy yells back, "I'm trying, mate! I can't see a fucking thing!" So as they swerve wildly to dodge the rocks, Jeffo looks at John and says, "What'd I tell you about them white fellas? They all mad." And John jokes back, "That's nothing. You should see me mate Chaz in Rush Hour." And then as the vehicle comes to a stop right before it runs into a very large boulder, John whispers to Jeffo, "Just be ready when the time comes, Jeffo." And Jeffo replies, "Whatever you say, mate. Whatever you say." So now the car is pretty much right in front of John and Jeffo, and we see Jiffy jump out of the vehicle first and get all worried about his car, saying, "Me truck! Look at me bloody truck! They broke the friggin' wheel!" But it doesn't seem like Miss Grinshaw cares much. Her and her men exit the vehicle with their weapons drawn, and she says, "Shut up, Jiffy. You needn't worry if that's the best they can do." Then she points the gun at John's head and says, "Still here, huh, Pom? I hope you can think of something fast, because you're treading on dangerous ground." And John sarcastically replies, Well, well, look out, Jeffo. It's Crocodile Dundee's mom." And at that slight, Trev jumps forward and hits John in the face with the butt of his rifle. And he yells, "You'll pay for that, you English queer. This is private property now." And then John falls to the ground, and as he struggles to get up, wiping the blood from his mouth, he says, "Ugh, are you sure?" Because John knows something they don't. And then Miss Grinshaw walks over to John and looks down at him and says, "Trev, calm down and leave him to me. What do you know that changes anything, Palm? Your 2 weeks are up. I have jurisdiction here now." And John looks up at her and says, "Yeah? Checked in on the radio lately. I've got a funny feeling your jurisdiction just got booted up the arse. But it doesn't seem like Miss Grenshaw cares about that, because she throws her radio and smashes it and says, and I have a feeling you're just playing for time. Trouble is, we'll never know. Then she points her gun at John, who now looks a bit more worried, and she says, I'm not in the mood to play mind games, Palm. These people have been given fair warning, but now it's out of my hands. Tell them they have 2 minutes to pack up their things and leave. After that, we start firing at you. But right as she says that, all of a sudden, one of the Aborigines begins to play the didgeridoo. And John's narration says, but the Aborigines already know the score. They've been here for 100,000 years, living as part of the river, and they're not about to go without a fight. I don't need to tell them a thing. Then we see a bunch of them gather around the man playing the didgeridoo, and they begin to dance, much like the ceremony that John was in the middle of at the beginning of this issue. And we can see some energy lines coming off the man playing the didgeridoo, and John's narration continues saying, the dance begins again in earnest. Their Dreamtime song unfolds like a cactus in the rain. It echoes back and forth across the river, resonating with the heartbeat of the land, setting off tremors which are heard across every first day. We see the white men feel something. They're not sure exactly what it is, but they get kind of scared, and Jiffy says, what are they up to now, Trev? And Trevor looks at him and says, beats me. Maybe the ugly little bleeders are saying goodbye. Then we see the Aborigines continue to dance, and more energy lines are coming, and they're getting bigger and stronger looking. And John's narration continues saying, the dance has become urgent, more insistent, but the tone is different from before. It's a subtle change in implication, a warning to the white men who've come to ruin the land. The Dreamtime invades the visible world, and I realize I'm not the only one on dangerous ground. Then we just see the white people's face, but all of them look terrified as they stare at the Aborigines dancing and whatever else they've called forth. Then we turn the page and we see what they've called forth, and of course it is the Rainbow Serpent, and we just see it swimming underneath the water as it comes from the depths. So the water on top's just kind of frothing, and it looks like something's about to come out. And John's narration continues saying, from somewhere in the swell, the cold anger of the Rainbow Serpent suddenly enters my perception. The lambs have been led to the slaughter. The rest is up to her. And a very terrified Miss Grenshaw puts the gun to John's head again and says, you did this. You palmy bastard. Make them stop. You hear me? I'll bloody kill you. But John very casually lights a cigarette and says, that's an object lesson in Antipodean logic. Arse upwards as usual. I'm only a sodden white man, you dozy old bat. You think this has anything to do with me? And just as he says that, the Rainbow Serpent bursts from the water, and the men begin freaking out, and they point their guns and yell, Jesus Christ! And then the rocks on the edge of the river begin to fall in because of the rumbling, which causes Jiffy and his car to fall in as well. Now, the interesting thing is, all the white men begin firing at the snake, but as they're firing, it seems like they're hitting their own men. Like Miss Grenshaw is shooting at the snake's head as it bites one of her men, but it seems like the man just dies from getting shot by her. So it might be that the Rainbow Serpent is an illusion, and all the white men are just kind of shooting themselves as they freak out in fear. But it's kind of hard to tell, so I might be wrong on that, because we don't ever see the snake actually like rip anyone apart. It is biting the man that Miss Grenshaw's shooting at, but it's possible that the 2 bloody puncture marks on his chest are just bullet wounds from her shooting at the snake's head that may or may not be there. So while this is going on, John's narration says, I settle back to watch the fun as the Dreamtime lurches out and headbutts White Man right in the nose. There's nothing I could do about it, even if I wanted to. Every earth god worth his salt demands a sacrifice once in a while. It's a transient thing. This ultimate authority, it passes into someone else before you have it completely in your grasp. Maybe you're the big fish in the river. Maybe you're not. It all depends on how you look at it, really. And kind of bolstering the idea that the snake isn't really there, we do see a panel of John and the Aborigines just staring at the white people shooting at nothing. Or I guess shooting at themselves and nothing. And Miss Grimshaw is yelling, no, get away from me, get away. And then she falls on her hands and knees from the rumbling. Then we see that she is face to face with the Rainbow Serpent. And it says to her, I know you poisoned the river, Whitey. You shouldn't have disturbed my dream. And Miss Grimshaw begs, don't, please. But her begging does nothing as the snake reels up and smashes its body on the ground and causes the rest of the edge of rocks to fall into the river, taking her and all the other white men with it. And as John watches this, his narration says, "The aborigines can see the carnage on the Dreamtime plane. Their god has sorted out the unbelievers. A righteous victory has been won. White man isn't equipped to deal with supernatural explanations. In his eyes, it can only go down as an unfortunate accident. Makes no difference, really. Either way, the Dreamtime wins by a landslide," which is kind of a cheeky double entendre, as there was a literal landslide, and also they defeated all of the white men without losing any aborigines or John. So we're left with John just staring at the rainbow snake on the edge of what's now the bank of the river, and he says to it, "You really owe me now, mate. I made you look pretty fucking sharp." And the snake gives a smile, I guess. It's hard to tell if a snake's smiling, but it looks happy. And then it goes back into the river, and as it does, it says, "I let you know, John Constantine." And then it disappears. And when we turn the page, we see Jeffo and John are walking back to Crowsville from the river, and Jeffo is saying, "I don't get it, Jono. You help us pretty good. Then it seemed like you run." And John replies, "Sorry, mate. I can't handle tearful goodbyes. Have a nice life, all right? And watch out for vampires in business suits. Nothing those fucking vultures like more than a chance to make money over a piece of land." And Jeffo replies, "Too late for that, mate. Wally says some shifty-looking bloke come all the way out to the river this morning. Say he just passing by." And John takes a drag of his cigarette and says, "Yeah, well, that's the trouble with claiming a victory in white man's world. You start coming up with legal precedents and everyone wants a piece. Better get used to it, mate. Not to worry. Lawyers are like serpent gods. They're a doddle, long as you know their secret." And Jeffo's kind of confused and he says, "What you mean?" And John replies, "They're all a bunch of useless tossers, Jeffo. You can tell the snake that from me." And now they've reached the town of Crowsville, and as John walks into it and waves back to Jeffo, Jeffo tosses him the didgeridoo and says, "Don't think so, mate. See you in the Dreamtime, eh?" Then we cut to John on the plane home from Australia, and he's holding the didgeridoo in his hands, and as he looks out the window, his narration says, "I'm downstream now, on the flight path to Gatwick. The Serpent's River is on the other side of the world. Australia seems like a half-remembered dream. Earth gods don't take kindly to being shafted by mere mortals. I'm starting to curse myself for my stupidity, convinced she's played me for a twat. Then I see it, and I realize she never had any choice but to pay up." Then we see John's face looking through the window down at the ground, and he says, "Holy fucking Christ." But we don't see what he's looking at. Then he just kind of leans back and smiles in his chair, and the narration continues saying, "She must have been going bloody mental, realizing the implications, trapped by the code of her twisted supernatural ethics. The poor fucker owes me more than she bargained for. After all, this first small victory is only the beginning. Everything comes from a seed." Then we turn to the last page and we see what he flew over that he was looking at, and it's a crop circle in the shape of a coiled snake. So it's kind of an ambiguous ending. I mean, it seemed like John was either reminded of the snake god from that, or maybe that's an actual sign from the snake god. So that, my friends, is the end of the issue. If you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And we will see you on the next one.